back in my favourite historical setting for a Doctor Who story this month on a Big Finish monthly range, as today I'm going to be taking a look at the Contingency Club, which is set in London, 1864, so I'm instantly happy because it's historic London, and I'm a sad human being that likes historic things, so yeah, this is already a good episode for me. So this is the second episode of the current 2017 Fifth Doctor trilogy that we've got going on, which isn't really a trilogy because we do have the normal sort of trilogy worth of stories of Adric, Tegan and Nessa. However, attached onto the end of this we also have the brand new format of two-part stories, which I'm very excited about. We have a Dalek one with the Fifth Doctor and Nessa in, which is sort of separated from this one, so we do still have the trilogy. However, we have a bonus edition of the Fifth Doctor coming on at the end as well, so we sort of get all of our Fifth Doctor stories in one this year, which I guess is a good thing. So as always, in the description below, I believe the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website is out now. The physical edition is $14.99, as with all the monthly range releases. However, if you want the download version, which is just the normal release that you can get from download on the Big Finish website, is $12.99. This episode is written by Phil Ryan. It is of course directed by Barnaby Edwards, and has the same TARDIS team as the previous release, having Nessa, Tegan and Adric in the TARDIS. First off, as always, going into the casting details on the Big Finish website, we have Peter Davison playing the Fifth Doctor, which once again he was on top form for this story. I'm really enjoying having all of the TARDIS team together. I think it's nice to have Adric and Tegan and things back. We sort of have a bit of development with those characters, and as I said in the previous review, we have a few of those ongoing themes such as what we had in the Starmen, so a few different ideas in there, and Adric's getting a little bit more development. We have Tegan having the same sort of attributes that she had in the actual TV show. Nessa is just on top form, as I say. But yeah, I think that the Fifth Doctor for this story, I think that he didn't really have sort of a few really standout moments. However, he was just consistently the Doctor, which was nice. It just sounded a little bit odd, but it was just nice to sort of have him in the story. It was a very Fifth Doctor one in a way, because he had some very sort of Fifth Doctor style of moments where he didn't want certain things to happen and things like that, and I do think that it was definitely a rather Fifth Doctor aimed story. Then of course you have Matthew Waterhouse is playing Adric, which I'll admit, when I sort of look at the TV show, the first thing that I think when I see Adric is not exactly a positive one, because I think that he was sort of a very, to put it bluntly, he wasn't really the best of characters in the TV show. However, once again, Big Finish have sort of gone on to adapt his character. As I say in the last story, he had that relationship stuff that he had with Autumn, which was very interesting to see. Yet with this one we have a little bit more of the developments in there, where we have him sort of being a little bit more of an integral part of the story. Definitely you've sort of the math talent that he has a little bit more in this story, which was a similar thing to the last one as well, and generally I think they sort of give him something to do which is aimed around his character, which is nice, and he sort of becomes not really a generic companion, which is nice to see. Sarah Sutton of course also plays Nessa, which once again the same thing applies that applied for the Starmen. I think that Big Finish always go on to where she came from, her background story, and it's just her customs and things like that. I think that they never shy away from the fact that she's an alien, and it's very unusual at this point in Doctor Who's history, where we had Adric who's an alien, and we also had Nessa who's an alien as well at once, and these days we can't even get one alien on the TARDIS. So yeah, it's nice to have sort of a little bit on there, and once again we have her sort of taking a little bit more of a lead role. I think that in a way, if there was somebody who's a little bit more important than the other companions in this story, I think that Nessa sort of had a part to play. She had a little bit more to do. In a way, she's sort of the higher companion. If they were in sort of ranks, Tegan and Adric would be at the bottom. Nessa would sort of be a little bit more experienced, and when we have Fifth Doctor on top of that. She's just such a nice character. I think that generally she's really nice and entertaining. She doesn't really have much funny things to do. However, just having her in the story sort of works because she has a nice feeling about her, which is something I guess it's very good for a companion, because you can very easily get into her character and sort of adjust to her, because she's sort of very welcoming, which is nice. And I think that generally she had that same idea in the show as well. I think that no matter what story she was in, she had something nice to do and sort of a nice part to play. And with this one, she had a little bit more of a role. As I say, she was sort of the leader of the group, knew sort of a few things to do when the Doctor wasn't there. And of course you have Janet Fielding as Tegan, and yeah, I think that once again a similar thing that applies for Adric. As I said in the previous review, she's not exactly the most positively looked back on of companions in the TV show, and I think that with this one, once again, Big Finish make her definitely a lot more likeable. She's a little bit like Mel to that extent. It's definitely the very human side of the TARDIS, because she is the only human on there, so she has a few little things, sort of she buys a cassette player and she shows Adric it, and of course in that time the cassette player would be sort of a massive technological thing, but Adric doesn't really like it. He thinks it is very simple, a very simple device, and I think that she definitely takes offence to that, and it turns out, of course, very much a Big Finish theme. Those smaller things that are featured at the very start of the story sort of create a much more larger impact at the very end. and had a little bit of an ongoing theme because she still wants to get back to Heathrow Airport, which is a similar thing for the Starmen. And then once again in this one we had a little bit of the Doctor trying to get back to Heathrow as well at the very end, and she's very determined to get back there. It sort of relates it back to the show itself and makes it feel much more real and much more to the time of the actual show than it was. And the final characters that I'm going to give sort of reference to, we of course have Laurel King, who's playing the Red Queen, and we also have Ollie McCalay. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but McCalay, I don't know, but yeah, he also played Edward, or Edwards even, which I'll get onto in a little bit. But yeah, once again, those two people sort of had a little bit more of an additional role in the story, and definitely sort of made the story float a little bit better. Moving on to the story itself now, the whole episode is based around a club where the gentlemen go and sort of have these different games and things, sort of your average club to an extent, but with it being Doctor Who, it's not your average club, and they go to sort of drink, play, I don't know, do whatever gentlemen's clubs do. I don't particularly know what they do, but yeah, sort of what they would have done in 1864. And yeah, it's a little bit of a leisure place. However, all the people that go there end up sort of being a little bit brainwashed. They don't really tend to go out. I sort of look at it as a little bit of a sort of prison in a way, because you never sort of see them leaving, and when they do, they're sort of brainwashed, and a few people go missing, and it's linked to the Contingency Club. And it's a very intriguing idea, because I think that throughout this story I always got the idea of sort of it being a little bit confined and a little bit locked in, which I think was probably down to the directing for this one, to be honest. Women sort of only go there, females can't, of course, and the people that are in control of it is of course a female, which is a very interesting idea, sort of straight away, having sort of that contrast there, which wouldn't have normally happened in the actual sort of historic past. But yeah, I think Edwards, which are on the front cover, and basically they're all the same person, which is once again a very interesting idea. We have them all sort of roaming around. They're the equivalent of sort of the butlers, where they go around asking the gentlemen if they would like a drink, things like that, sort of the general helpy people. However, they're all exactly the same. They're all sort of this cloned person, all called Edward. We have like Edward 23, Edward 5, and I think that once again it's an interesting concept. It's something that's been done in Doctor Who before. To an extent, it sort of reminded me a little bit of the Vok robots, because even though they're not the same person, they have different ranks and things like that. This sort of is the more human version of that, and the way that they go around, and by the end we get sort of a development with the Edwards, where very much they are all killed off, and it is sort of quite a sad scene, because they don't really know what they are. They're born to serve the Red Queen, they go on and do these things, and they don't really have any other aims in life, and then once they do sort of fulfill those aims, the Red Queen sort of just finishes them technically, and they sort of just melt away. And I think that it's a very sort of, it's an inhuman idea, I think, that it's sort of a little bit eerie at the same time, but because of there being actual humans and they sort of believe they're sort of human, it's a very odd concept. I constantly kept guessing of who the Red Queen is, what their powers are and things like that. Are they an alien to an extent? Sort of what do they want from this? And I think that it's a very keeping guessing style of story, because you always have something new to be revealed. And we don't really get too much of the Red Queen until the very end, and to be honest, throughout the whole of the story itself we don't really get too much of her. It's only until the final act we sort of really get to know her aims and things like that. It's a very nicely laid out story, because I think that once you get all the pieces together, you know exactly what's going on. It's very nice and very easy to follow, and if you're new to Big Finish, this might be very much a story for you. The concept for this one is the Red Queen is essentially playing a game with her brother, where they go and take over another person's planet, where they have sort of bombs and things, and they wire them up around certain areas of the UK, as it would be for this story, and they go and wire up certain things, and they're going to kill absolutely everybody. And she wants to confront the Queen, and she's basically going to go, right, you're going to give me the whole of this country, otherwise all of these people are going to get blown up. If she says no, she'll press one trigger, blown up, everybody dies, and then she keeps on going until she eventually says yes. And she is essentially playing a game, and it is constantly referred to throughout the whole of the story as something as a game, and that is why she uses the Contingency Club as a way to disguise what her actual plot is. The Contingency Club itself has been sort of built around a spaceship on the inside, and she's in there in her spaceship controlling everything, and that is why she has the Edwards, because they're sort of her little runner things that go and do everything, like her little working ants to an extent. They go and perform certain things, get people into the Contingency Club to sort of disguise it and things like that. And it is a very sort of, it's a childish plot in a way, because you have these sort of older adult people essentially playing a game of life and death with other people and using other people's lives as sort of a bargaining tool, and that is something that is very dark. Could have been played on a little bit more, admittedly. It would be nice to maybe sing that sort of took to the extent of maybe actually having a few people die here and there, to have a little bit more of the threat, maybe having, right, if you do this person will get shot, which is something that did in fact happen to one extent at the very end of the story, where one of the people that comes in who works for her brother basically thinks that he's got the upper hand with a gun. He comes in and says, right, you're going to stop this. And then he makes the mistake of saying, right, you're going to stop this, otherwise Peabody is going to get shot. Peabody was sort of the right-hand man style of person, so he went to aim at Peabody, and then she just goes, yeah, alright then, and then he goes and shoots him, and then he literally dies, serving the person that he's been brought up to serve as the Red Queen. I think that at that point you very much understand that it is a very dark concept, because she's basically just had somebody's life wished away like that. She doesn't have any mercy whatsoever, because that is the game that she's playing. In a way, it is essentially one massive game, and she doesn't really understand what she's doing. She's not actually taking people's lives into consideration, and once again, as I say, maybe it would have been nice to see that adapted on a little bit more, such as maybe groups of people of, right, you're going to do this, otherwise this whole group are going to die. She goes, yeah, okay. Maybe having a little bit of the brother even in there as well, because I do believe from what I can remember, the only side of the brother that we in fact seen was near enough at the very end of the story, and even then that was only on a screen or over a telecom, so maybe it would have been nice to see what he was doing on the other side and to see sort of what he was doing to try and defeat her to an extent. But yeah, as I say, it's a very sort of dark concept, I think. They're also introduced to a character called Marjorie, which is very much the person of that time that has been affected by the events of the Contingency Club. Her father went in to do normal Contingency Club style of things, to go and drink, and then he didn't come out again. He's now a part of the Contingency Club. They eventually meet up when she goes back with Tegan and Adric, and it turns out that when they in fact meet up again, thinks that she is a man, which she of course isn't, because he's been brainwashed into believing in the Gentleman's Club is literally a gentleman. And I think that once again it sort of shows how emotions could be played with as a part of this massive game overall, and once again contributing to how people are actually affected. Something that I really like with this one is that Film Arise actually used the period. We have a lot of Doctor Who where it goes back to a certain period, and we don't really have much of that actually used in the story. In a way, it's just used as a bit of a set dressing to say, look, we've gone back in time, woo. But with this one, we actually have the time period contributing to the plot of the episode, such as we have the Queen, things like that being used, and we also have the introduction of the Underground as well. And I do believe, I can't remember what line it was, I think it was the Metropolitan line, where we have the main building of that and the way that it was getting all the tunnels and sort of the new parts of the London Underground, which at that point would have been a very new and interesting idea to the people of London, and we have them actually using that in a way to actually transport bombs and link up the whole of London to this whole bomb network. And I think that that is a way to use a period to its benefit, because we have an actual thing that happened in that time being contributed to an alien plot. It's very much how the Visitation did to an extent, where we had the Visitation going back and sort of the pterodactyl ship in fact being the creation of the Great Fire of London. And I think that once again it's just nice to have Doctor Who going back and doing things like that, because it's something that's not really done too often. However, it is quite an effective thing. For off this one, I think that it's a very enjoyable listen for those people that really do like the Fifth Doctor era. Of course, you're getting introduced to all of the Fifth Doctor companions that in fact sort of appeared as the main sort of TARDIS unit for the Fifth Doctor era. And I think it's an enjoyable one, because it's one that you can easily sit down to, listen to and enjoy. Even though this is 2 hours long, sometimes with the monthly range ones you can occasionally feel like, oh, this part is a little bit dragging to an extent. But with this one, it actually has something to contribute each story. And I didn't really think that this one sort of had any complicated loops in it. I didn't really feel that halfway through I needed to go back and re-listen to certain parts to actually fully understand it. This one, it's very nice and refreshing to have a plot that is in fact very easy to follow, and something that once again very much for the new Big Finish listener. That, as I said at the start of the review, I will leave the link in the description below to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. It's out now and it's $14.99 for the physical version. Then, of course, finally next month we have Zoltes, which is the final episode of the current Fifth Doctor trilogy, written by Matthew J. Elliott. So I guess if you're a monthly range reviewer, I will see you then. Thanks for watching this review. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a big like, and please subscribe if you're not already. If you have any questions, please do leave them below and I'll be sure to answer them at some point in the near future. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time. So thanks for watching and bye for now.